Hey guys, welcome to Piece of Code and welcome to this video. So in this video, we are going to continue our Azure Administrator Certification series. And today in this particular episode, we are going to see about Azure AD and identity management. We are going to cover a lot of topics which are very, very important for the certification as well as for the people who are starting with Azure. So let's start with it. So first of all, before actually talking about Azure AD, right? Now it is called as Microsoft Entra ID, right? So don't get confused between the two. Both are the same things. So whenever I'm going to show the the hands-on, there you will see the Entra ID instead of Azure AD Active Directory. So both are the same basically, and in the exam you might see both of them, right, coming. So don't get confused with these two names. Both mean the same thing. Both are like point to the Azure's identity management system, and we are going to discuss about that. So on-prem AD. So by the term on-prem means on premises, right? So this is out of cloud. We are not talking about the cloud Azure AD as of now. Let's first discuss what is, on-prem AD. So it's like a directory service that lives inside your physical or virtual server. So whatever you have, right, your servers you have on your on-premises system, it's a directory service, right? A lot of people who have worked with Windows file systems and all of these things in, in on-prem Windows administrators on on-prem, systems, they would know better about this, right? That this is a like a security system or like for your on-prem network, your local network. It works on protocols like LDAP, Kerberos, and NTLM, and it is used to manage Windows devices, user authentication groups, policies, and organizational units. All of these are part of your AD, right? We're not going to talk a lot about this on-prem AD because that is not relevant in terms of to our certification, but just to give you an idea, just imagine like it's like your office building or your office, right? You go to your office, you have your identity card, and your identity card has certain level of access to certain places, right? You cannot access each and every part of the building. For example, if you're working on a research institute or on a government funded research or something like that, right? Like an example, you'll not have access to all of the facilities. So this is like that. So basically, there will be a lot of directories on your on-premise systems, right? Network files, network directories. So each user will have certain access to certain data in the particular on-prem network, right? So, and the user also needs to get authenticated, right? And there will be some policies. All of these are managed on the on-premises network that is known as on-prem AD. We're not talking about cloud at all. This is all on-prem. Okay. Now, if you see, if you have a corporate network or a local network, so basically we have our on-prem Azure directory, which has the users and groups, all of your policies and organizational units, and all of your devices, in your corporate network is managed by the Azure on-prem AD, not Azure on-prem AD, just on-prem AD, Microsoft, on-prem AD. So this was all about on-prem AD, guys. I hope that is clear. Now talking about Azure Active Directory. So now we are shifting to the cloud. We just talked a little bit about, the on-premises network. Now let's talk about the cloud. So in cloud, everything is dependent on identity because it's public. You need to have the principle of least privilege, right? For every user or group or entity you create on the cloud. So what is Azure Active Directory or Entra ID? Basically, it is helps to manage the identities in the cloud. So you create, one identity and you can log in across whatever apps that you have access to. For example, You can log in across Microsoft 365, Azure portal, any SaaS based apps like Salesforce, Dropbox, anything like that. It's like your Google account, right? Like you create a Google account and then you access Google Drive, Gmail, YouTube, whatever you want. So that is Azure Active Directory, right? It also supports multi-factor authentication, SSO, and conditional access as well. Okay, so the difference that you need to understand between on-prem AD and Azure Directory is that Azure Active Directory is that on-prem AD is a way of security mechanism, you can say, or access control, right, based on certain groups and policies, all of that things, right? Even if you go to certain companies where they give you laptops, right, and they will set up your Windows account for you, right? And if you see, whenever you log in into that particular Windows account, you will not have access to all of the folders, not the root folder. You will only have access to your users folder, that user that has been created for you in your laptop, right? That is, you can compare it to Active Directory, domain control, whatever we call it, right? In on-prem AD, it's your own corporate network, and you are logging into a device in your own corporate network. That is a different thing. But Azure Active Directory, you are creating one user, you're telling, okay, all of these permissions or policies I'm giving to you, you can access all of these services on Azure portal, as well as you can access some additional apps as well. It's like a single piece of identity, like your Aadhaar card, right? That's the example that I can give it to you. So you see, it's just like all of your app registration, conditional accesses, users and groups, right? It's under your Azure AD Tenant, right? And it's public, so I've put an internet access box over there, not to be confused, right? So what is a tenant, right? Now we have talked about Azure Active Directory. Now let's talk about the tenant. So basically, if we talk about, okay, let's first talk about, the key differences between the on-prem AD and Azure AD. So basically, as we have talked about a lot, the architecture is hierarchical, and Azure AD, it's flat, it's tenant-based architecture. We are going to understand what a tenant is in a minute. The devices are all Windows domain joined, but here it is cross-platform cloud joined. It means that you can access any of the apps apart from Azure as well. It's like a universal ID, you can say, right? You can do SSO, you can do multi-factor authentication, you can do whatever you want based on the access given to you, right? Protocols, I mean, all the local network protocols that you can use, Kerberos, LDAP, here OAuth 2, SAML, OpenID, policy, group policy, Intune or conditional access. Best use is on-prem AD is internal network, and for Azure AD, it's for cloud or SaaS applications, right? It's on the cloud. This is for your local network. Simple as that. Some, things will overlap, like the creation of users and groups and policies. But yeah, it's like the only functionality of your on-prem AD, but Azure AD provides much more than that. That you need to understand, right? Azure AD is like a superset of on-prem AD, you can say. Okay, so now you understood what an Azure Active Directory is. Now, what is a Azure Active Directory tenant? Okay, so whenever you are going to create, an Azure account, right, a tenant will get created for you. That's a default tenant, I would say. It's like the Azure AD is like your apartment, right? And in that apartment, you have, sorry, your whole apartment building, I would say, the whole apartment building. And in that particular building, you have purchased an apartment, right? And that apartment is your tenant. It belongs to you, right? Whatever you do inside that apartment, it depends on you. You cannot forcefully enter any other apartment. You cannot just go to any other tenant of any other organization and do something with that, or any other organization cannot do something in your tenant, right? It's your org's identity container, right? Like it's like a dedicated and isolated instance of Azure AD. It's for your own org, right? And it is created automatically when you sign up for a Microsoft cloud service like Azure or Microsoft 365. So whatever users, groups, apps, devices that is specific to your organization will be stored in that particular tenant. Understood? So basically, we talked about Active Directory, and then in Active Directory you have a tenant, which is your organization's identity. That is another thing. It can behave like your organization's identity, and in that particular tenant, you can create users, groups, whatever and whatnot. Now each tenant gets his own unique domain, like mycompany.microsoft.com, for example, right? And I'll show you in the in the hands-on, how it works, right? That is all about the tenant. So you see where there is Azure Cloud, and there are two companies like Nimbus Tech Tenant and Vertex Solution Tenant. Each company tenant has their own users, groups, and apps. And here, Vertex Solution Tenant has its own users, groups, and apps. Right? Simple as that. Okay, so little bit let's discuss about the users and groups before actually doing a hands-on. So basically, a user is no one but anyone who needs access to your Azure or Microsoft Cloud environment. Can be a member or a guest. I mean, you can also give a temporary user some temporary credentials, uh, you know, for temporary access. So basically, you have your organization, you have onboarded an employee, and that's a database employee or a database admin. You want to give access to only the database related policies or permissions. Sorry. So you onboard that user into Azure, create a user, and that will be the member of your organization, right? And then you provide whatever permissions, least privilege permissions that is needed for that user. That is a user, right? There's nothing more to understand in this. It's the same concept that of AWS. Whoever knows AWS will easily understand this. Like a user is no one but a single person having an ID or a password, and using that ID password he can access whatever has permission has been given to that particular user by the admin, right? So that is all about users and groups basically. uh, for example, that database admin that just joined you, right? um, there are already a lot of database admins, right? You have created a group of database admins. So you don't individually go and assign permission to every other individual. So what you do is you put them in a group and you assign the permission as a whole to the entire group. That is how actually the permissions are granted in Azure as well as in AWS. We're going to talk about a lot about this policies, right? RBACs and all those things, maybe in the next video. But for now, just understand that groups are nothing but groups of users or resources as well. And you give some permission to the whole group, and they will get those permissions to do certain stuff, right? Instead of individually going and assigning it, you just directly assign the group. So there are two types of groups, guys. One is security groups and one is Microsoft 365 groups. The difference is that security groups are basically your Azure groups, right? Where you assign the permissions, your RBAC permissions for certain resources, like a user in a group, right? In your like a Azure user that you have onboarded and you have put it in the group, and you want to assign some permissions to that particular user via the group. Basically, you have to put it in a security group. By default, when you create a group in Microsoft Entra ID in your Azure, it becomes a security group. So that's that. Microsoft 365 groups are basically all the other SaaS based applications. If you want to share, right, to the individuals in the group, like mailbox, calendar, Outlook, Excel, all these things are part of Microsoft 365. So basically, you can add them in a Microsoft 365 group. They can have access to all of these applications like SharePoint and whatnot. Whatever the admin has given, those guys will have that particular um, things, accesses. Okay, so before we talk about the key pointers for the exam, let's quickly see how you can create a user and all those things, right, in the portal. So this is your portal. I hope you guys have created your Azure account by now. So if you see over here, um, um, this is the, we'll just go to Entra ID. You know what? You can just go over here and you can just select Entra ID over here. So this is my tenant. It's already by default, this tenant has been created. And it says there is one user, that is me, I think, and the group is one. By default, a group got created, it seems. And some other information is there that we are not concerned about for now, right? We have our tenant ID, we have our primary domain, as I told you, right? Whenever for an organization you create, Azure account, basically, it creates organization name dot on Microsoft.com. So here what we need to do is basically we want to create a user now, right? So we are going to say over here, we're going to say user and we're going to say create new user, right? So let's talk about certain, stuff over here. So the principal name, you can give it like, DB, not DB admin. Let's make a good user over here. You're gonna say Rohit, for example, you're going to give, okay. Display name you can give as Rohit, right? Password, whatever you want to provide for that password. If you don't want to auto generate the password, you can just give some other password, right? I'm going to just give some random password. Uh, we should not actually show the password anyways, but it's a very simple password. So it's like the minimum of 8 characters. Okay, I think that is fine. Account enabled, if you check the account enabled, then the user will be able to log in into the account, right? But sometimes what happens is you want to create a user that will only access certain, the Azure account just by some API calls, right? To fetch some data in his terminal or something like that. Actual account login is not needed for that user. In that case, you can just uncheck this particular box, right? But for now, we will just keep it. Next is properties. We're going to just skip all of these things. Assignments, we don't need that. You can add the group directly over here, but you can add the user directly over here to a group, but we'll create the group later on, something like that. So it's a member. Nothing has been assigned as of now. It's a simple user for now. Okay, and we're going to click on create. So successfully created user, uh, Rohit. Now, if I go to users now, I can see that there are two users, right? And Rohit and Akash, and this is the thing. Now, what we can do is basically we can create a group. I'm going to just, go and go to my overview. Here, we're going to click group and we're going to give the group. So see here, you can choose what kind of group you want to create. So by default, it is security over here. So group name, I'm going to say dev team because it's a dev guy. So let's just say dev team. Group description is it's a group for developers, right? And membership type assigned. Owners members are not going to. Okay, you can select a member over from here, but so here we can just add this guy and say one member selected, right? And we can just click on create. So this will create the group. Okay, so if you go to groups now, we see there are total number of two groups, and this is the one default created, and this is the one that we have created for now, right? Now, there is a lot of things you can do over here. You can go to low roles and administrators, assign some roles and permissions and all those things. Uh, but we are going to do that in the next video, because we are going to dig a little bit deeper on all this permissions and roles concept, because that might be a little bit, confusing. So for now, let's stop here. We have understood what an Azure directory is, what is on-prem, what is cloud Azure directory or Entra ID, right? Both are the same. I'm just giving you this particular information every time, because you don't have to get confused when you see Entra ID instead of Azure Active Directory in the exam. And we saw what are users, what are groups, what is a Azure tenant, right? And we saw the differences and all that, and we saw some hands-on over here. Now let's go back to our presentation, and last but not the least, we will not forget about some key pointers for the exam that is needed. So how Azure AD differs from on-prem AD? Please don't confuse them. They both are different. One is for your internal network or your corporate networks. Another one is for the cloud, where you manage your identities, right? Dedicated identity space for your organization is a Azure AD Tenant, that is on the cloud, right? So whenever you create an organization, a tenant gets created. Users can be internal or external. Uh, they can be guest users as well with some temporary permissions. That is also fine. Differences between security groups and Microsoft 365 groups. We discussed this, and you have to always remember the difference between these two types of groups. So I know it's early on, but you can expect questions from identity types, roles, conditional access, and user creation, group creation, all of this stuff, right? It's a very common topic on the certification exams, and we are going to cover a lot of topics anyways on this roles and conditional access and all those things in our subsequent videos. So till then, have a nice day, take care, and bye-bye.